show, The Plain Truth, where each week we dig into some mystery, conspiracy, or whatever seems to be the topic of the day. And my name is Plain. I'll guide you through the mysteries of today. And we have two special guests, Alton and Neil. And today's topic is the universe electric. So Neil, Alton, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for asking.
Good to be here, Blaine.
Yeah, glad you could make it. So we'll get right into the topic. The electric universe theory. Where did it come from? Who started it? What can we think about it? I guess I'll just give some thoughts about it. I remember as a kid really enjoying the works of Tesla and thinking about him and all of his gadgets he built. And when I started reading about him, I realized that he had a totally different theory of physics than what the textbooks taught. And this is quite interesting. He even had a different theory of gravity. He called it the dynamic theory of gravity. Have either of you heard of that?
Yes.
Yeah, in the Tesla books, or I shouldn't say books, but interviews and such.
Mm-hmm. Well, isn't that interesting that perhaps, certainly one of the greatest minds of the last century had an entirely different vision of what made the world tick, what made the universe tick. And again, always liking anomalies and mysteries and such, this really caught my eye as a young boy. And I was especially interested that he basically said that relativity is crap. And that essentially Einstein was nothing to be happy about at all. He said that, first of all, the theory of relativity was hundreds of years old, and it was originally done by a guy named Boscovich, who was a very, very talented Serbian, had written thousands of books and other things, and was one of the better scientists of that period of time. But that, in any case, the theory itself is totally wrong. And so I thought we could start with that and say a little bit about what did Tesla think, because he's more the kind of stuff we're interested in. So Alton, what do you think? What was Tesla referring to?
Well, Tesla was referring to what he understood as electricity in the universe. We today know it more as electromagnetism. It's a combination of both energies, one being the forebearer, electricity, and the result is magnetism. And with his head start in that type of thinking, he was able to pull off truly amazing things that still to this day remain, well, not understood.
Well, that's for sure. I don't think we really know a lot of what he was doing, like in Wardenclyffe. What was he really up to? A lot of people say that he had a massive antenna underground. Do you think that's the case? What do you think?
No, I do not think there was a massive antenna underground. The whole Wardenclyffe idea was sort of like a gathering point, an attractor for energies in Earth's atmosphere and beyond, out in the cosmos. And by all reports, he seemed to be rather successful with that, perhaps beyond what he thought would happen.
Well, he also used places where there were magnetic anomalies and, what some people term as vortexes and energy eyes too, to conduct a lot of his experiments. I do know that.
Right. It was a matter of choice of place. Why there? And if you've looked at the magnetic maps of the Earth, you can see two things immediately. There is no real consistency from space to space, and it is wildly broken up. And not only that, because of the nature of the Earth and the way currents flow, the magnetic properties of one given area are actually temporary because the magnetic field is always in flux at some level.
Yes.
So being there at what was it, Wardenclyffe, it was the right time, the right place for those particular energies. If he would have done that, say, 50 years later, his results might have been different. Actually, they probably would have been different.
I agree.
Now, why is that?
Human
Well,
intrusion.
that's just because yeah, go ahead, Neil.
Sorry. Human intrusion. For me, I compare, where he conducted some of his experiments utilizing the Earth energies, the bioelectric energies of the Earth, and the magnetic energies, to places where there was limited human intrusion. And I think most people would agree that the more people there are in certain areas, the effect on the natural fields can be rather detrimental.
Yeah, I would agree with that. It can also be positive when you have people who are just naturally engaged with whatever the magneto and electric energies are of any given area.
Yes.
They can not only be a part of that, but they can add to the beneficial qualities of that. And you see that here, there, and everywhere, where this community will thrive, this other community will not. And we will look at the basic human-caused reasons, economy and agriculture, and we'll look at how much rain has fallen and this, that, and the other thing. And it just seems that some places have it just absolutely right for a while, and other places do not. And those places that are not, they are not aligning themselves with those energies and acting towards benefit with those energies. And because, like I said earlier, the magnetic energies of the Earth are in a continual flux, this will change over time. And we've seen it before, like in people just stopping, focusing, and just really tuning in to what needs to be done, and then they get it done. And then there's a change not only in that person, in the immediate people around that person, but in the area as a whole. I mean, we're venturing off into another area here with human effects of magnetism and energy, but we're all a part of this universe,
Don't worry, the show is all about wandering. Okay, so what you're saying kind of makes me think of Edward Leeds Skalman and his Coral Castle. Obviously, we don't really know what he did, but on the other hand, do you think it might have only worked well at that particular period in time, and then let's say today, being close to Miami, it wouldn't work?
Yeah, there again, it's a matter of energies changing, and you did a great job of pronouncing his last name. I'm not going to attempt it.
Okay.
He was able to tap into those energies. And you find that with people accomplishing things all around the world. You stop and look at you started off with Tesla. Look at what he did. My gosh, that guy had to have been really tapped in order to pull off some of these things. And by applying his mind to what he actually observed and, of course, felt, he was able to produce just so much that has impacted our world in ways that we can't even imagine yet.
Well, for sure. He was kind of a mystic and really at a different level from just about all of us, I think, his way of thinking. Interestingly enough, I remember he gave a speech where he criticized Einstein and relativity and all that, and he said, look, this isn't science, this is metaphysics. They're
Right.
Smart people, but they don't know what they're doing. They don't do tests. And so I think that what really makes him special is that Tesla actually physically did things. And
well, in Einstein's defense, if you read what Einstein has written over the years, he's rejected such things as the theory of the black hole.
Yep.
He's looked at his calculations, his theories of not only general relativity, but his theory of special relativity, and always maintained that these were just theories. He used constants which he knew were not constants, such as the speed of light. The speed of light is not a constant. You know, scientists try to fool themselves and fool us and say, yes, it's constant. Well, the speed of light fluctuates. It goes slower, it goes faster, so it cannot really be considered a constant. And Einstein was well aware of this. And in speaking with people throughout the years, whether it was Velikovsky or, oh my God, even just writing his own papers, his theory he was never really ever happy with. It was just an idea, a starting point to work with. However, other scientists took it and ran with it, did various experiments claiming to confirm his theory, such as the Michelson-Morley experiment, where they measured light bending around the sun, which, boy, the results of that are still sort of in question.
I'd say those are questionable results, but then again, I'm a conspiracy theorist, so I'm going to have my doubts. And I think we should give some of the doubts about Einstein, too. I mean, he worked in the Swiss Patent Office. His wife was either Croatian or Serbian and was familiar with the earlier theory of relativity. And really, again, this guy Boscovich was quite well known in Eastern Europe. So it's questionable to what extent Einstein had new ideas, or to what extent his ideas were either promoted or fashionable for some reason in the West. And that's a long topic, and we really probably can't get into that too much. But you can see how physics at that point went into this kind of how many angels can dance through the head of a pin, period. It became very theoretical as opposed to Tesla actually doing everything imaginable, building all these amazing things.
Yeah, that was because the mathematicians finally took over what is essentially an observational science. And, 1 + 1 = 2 works for everybody. When you get E to E = mc squared, we're doing a lot of fudging there,
Well, I'm going to admit my prejudice up front, so all the physicists out there can come after me on this one, but I'm from an engineering background, and I like, the study of things that are real, like, building dams and bridges and, rockets and such, because I know that they work or they don't work, and I have a lot of faith in them, and I don't have too much faith in black holes, so we'll just leave it at that.
Or dark matter, for that matter.
Wait a minute. I mean, what? They find new, 99% of the universe we missed. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
We couldn't find it.
Okay.
So what was it? 99% of the mass and now 99% of the energy. Most of us, when our theories are off by 2 orders of magnitude, reevaluate our fundamental premises, but not these mathematical physicists. Anyway, so that's kind of the issue with Einstein versus Tesla. Tesla had all these great ideas, and he also argued essentially that I guess you would say energy comes from the medium. Is that a fair way of saying it? How would you say that? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
I know what you're trying to say, but I would probably say it more like energy is the medium. Whatever medium you choose, energy remains the medium, because energy is everything. Everything is energy at some level. And so it's a matter of tapping into the energy, which Tesla was obviously able to do.
Right, but I think it was even a little more in the sense like, let's say you create something, plutonium or whatever. Plutonium is only plutonium in the sense that it's surrounded by this field of energy. Like we're bathed in this field of energy, and if somehow you dramatically could cut that, you would essentially have different effects, or maybe I'm misunderstanding, but that's how I've read or understood some of what he either said.
It's not so much the cutting. The cutting was more what Einstein and his followers were into. And that's why I often call nuclear energy a dirty energy, because it's destructive of what is there, what already exists as an energy. You're essentially destroying an energy to release an energy, whereas Tesla would take it from the creative point, if I could use that word, creative. He would essentially tap into the energy and let the energy become more energy, if you can follow that. It's this energy adds to this energy, and we have this other energy that is now free that we can use for other purposes. And that's what Tesla was achieving.
Okay, well, I tell you what I found. I happened to print out something. I have it in front of me where Tesla, on a speech at his 81st birthday, critiqued Einstein's theory of relativity. And, of course, there's a long speech. But he first he just attacked the general, issue of relativity, which he didn't go along with. But then he said, my second discovery was of a physical truth of the greatest importance. As I have searched the entire scientific records in more than a half a dozen languages for a long time without finding the least anticipation, I consider myself the original discoverer of this truth, which can be expressed by the statement, there is no energy in matter other than that received from the environment. And so I think that's what I was trying to get at, is that essentially...
Yeah. Well, no, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I'm just going to say it. So as I understood it, he was trying to say that we're all in all kinds of media, different, energy is all around us in different ways. And what we think of as being essentially internal to something is not. It's its reaction with the environments that it's in. But again, I'm not an expert in exactly how to interpret what he's saying.
Explaining it that way, yes. And there again, it's the energy is all around us. And what do I want to say? Form, matter, all these things are a result of, like in the study of kinematics. You've seen YouTube videos on that. Perhaps you've read books on it also, where
Yes.
frequency essentially produces form. Now, if you attack energy, or not attack, but impress frequency onto energy, that energy will take a form. It could end up being a rock. It could end up being a scorpion. It could end up being a cloud in the sky. It could end up being a tree growing out of the ground. Whatever it ends up is usually a result of frequency.
Mm-hmm. No, it makes sense to me. Neil, have you got any thoughts on this?
Yes, I would say you're talking about the very essence of energies. And to me, Tesla harnessed the flow of, matter, whether it's quantum matter, chi. He harnessed the electric universe. He harnessed the magnetics. He harnessed the electricity. He shaped it. He formed it. He made it malleable, and he put it to work. as Alton said, he didn't go about it like nuclear energy, destructing it. He went about it from the point of view, I will add to it. That's my very limited understanding of it. But it is pretty much, as far as I can see, what he did. It also brings up, in some ways, I think it's Maxwell's theory of electricity. Now, I'm not sure, but didn't Maxwell say there were 4 essential points instead of 3 to electricity? Does anybody know?
Well, it's been a long time since I've looked into this. That sounds familiar. I know that Eric Dollard, who some argue is like the closest we have to Tesla today, is publishing a book on essentially his theory that there are, I guess he calls them 4 quadrants, I think is the phrase he uses.
Yes.
And so it's, and Dollard is a big fan of Steinmetz and the older school of practical hands-on physics.
Mm-hmm.
So it sounds quite believable to me. Alton, do you happen to know?
No, honestly, like you, it's been such a long time since I've read Maxwell. It's like, it's buried in there somewhere, but I can't call it to the screen at this moment.
My database
as far
brain.
As Max, go ahead.
I think
no,
what
it's
I'm
just hard
trying
to remember all this.
Yeah, I think what I'm trying to express is, as you say, Dollard uses 4 reference points. Tesla used 4 reference points, and standard electricity, they don't use 4 reference points; they use 3.
Yes, I think we're generally suspecting that this is the case, and that
Right.
the older theories or understandings were actually better, and I think being again very jaded when it comes to the machinations of powerful corporations or financiers, I think partly we always have to suspect that it's in their interest to have misunderstandings out there.
Exactly.
It's an unfortunate fact of reality, but I mean, let's say you controlled something. Let's say you worked for the Lockheed Skunk Works, and you had there the ability to quickly go to planets and back safely. Well, you're not going to tell people how to do it. In fact, you're going to promote misunderstandings so nobody can figure out how you actually do it. And even if you personally didn't want to do it, the government, the military, they would really, really want you to do that so that the Chinese or Russians wouldn't easily figure it out. It's just human nature. And corporations are no better. They're just looking after their short-term interests and control and profits. So I think we have to always suspect that. But why don't we move on a little bit from the kind of the minutiae of some of that, and kind of get back to a little bit of a higher level now that we've done a bit of justice to Tesla, and say we have different paradigms now. The paradigm currently is this mathematical physics, which many would argue is driven by the idea of gravity being the most important thing. Everything is a question of gravity, right?
Right.
And we know that that's kind of missing something all around us.
Yeah, it's missing
Electricity,
a whole lot of everything
magnetism,
around.
it's missing a lot of things, right? And that's why this show is called The Universe Electric. What are they missing? They're missing electricity and magnetism. And Alton, why don't you give us a bit, perhaps of a high-level perspective on that, the alternative?
Well, the very first thing that comes to mind when I think of gravity is, wow, just, how silly can they be? Granted, Newtonian physics has given us a lot and taken us to places where we obviously weren't in the medieval period. Nevertheless, the thing is, electricity is this is such a huge number. I can't even think of the word that you could use to describe it, other than as just a matter of measuring the power between the electrons that float around in the universe and what we call gravity. the electricity that floats in the universe is like 27 orders of magnitude more powerful than gravity. So really that there makes you stop and think just really how useful is gravity. When we start looking at the reigning paradigms of, let's say our solar system, and they base the distances of planets and on how they space themselves and how they rotate, in orbit around the sun, that it's all a matter of gravity. I'm sorry, I didn't fall off the turnip truck yesterday. If you have a power out there that's 27 orders of magnitude above gravity, I would tend to think that that particular power would be what's behind the spacing of the planets and how we're all attracted to the sun and moving about it. That would have to be the power rather than gravity. And then people will ask, well, what holds you on the Earth? And of course, the big joke is that Earth sucks. But that's not the case. If you look at electricity gives us our basic sense of attraction. Everyone knows the old adage, opposites attract. Well, what are opposites? The charges. You have positive and negative. And it's same with magnetism, which is a result of the flow of electricity. It'll produce that magnetism, and magnetism attracts to things that are magnetic. You have that on your hard drive in a computer. That's why your computer hard drive will work, is because of the magnets in there. And, I just don't see gravity having much to do with anything.
I think we
and I often question if gravity even exists.
Well, isn't gravity just a field effect of electromagnetism?
Yeah, you stepped right into it. That would exactly be it. It is an effect of electromagnetism. And even Tesla was pointing to that.
I let the secret out of the bag there.
Yeah,
we're not supposed to say that.
Well, but we do.
No. What I'm trying to say is you can't say that and maintain credibility. Fortunately, I have no credibility, so I don't have to worry about it. But
that's why we're on the bot forum.
That's why we're here. There's a strong case to be made that they need to reevaluate their premises. Like you said, 27 orders of magnitude. Now, I said a minute ago, if you're off by 2 orders, you need to rethink what you're doing, right?
Right.
But if there's a 27 orders of magnitude, 27 with 27 zeros is a lot of zeros for me. So I think that now we get back to that topic a minute ago, and that is the paradigm control. This is about paradigm control. So along with the hopelessly mathematical physics with black holes and mystery entities and all kinds of things, all of these theoretical mysteries they're creating, I think they're just redirecting. It's the usual magicians at the top redirecting us from what's important. And there are a lot of reasons for that. First of all, if we're surrounded by practically unlimited energy, that means that we should be able to harness it pretty quickly or cheaply relative to, say, petroleum or something, or nuclear power plants, right? So we don't need those things. We don't need the Rockefellers. We don't need General Electric. We don't need these guys.
What?
They're just parasites bossing us around and polluting the earth hopelessly for their control purposes. So that's one of the reasons. But I think another reason is even higher than that in a sense, and that is they've created a spiritual and a religious kind of paradigm too. And
exactly.
That is, it comes with things like evolution and the idea that modern man is the best. Everything we have today is the best, right? So you shouldn't look at the way things were done 50 or 100 or 500 years ago, because we're by definition far better, right?
Well, and here we're moving into the realm, though, of the greatest drug of all for humanity, and that is power. Not power to run your light bulb or your computer, but power that you can exercise over other people. Because what you are doing is maintaining a hierarchy, and that hierarchy is based on force. Okay, in India you had the old caste system. Throughout the West, especially enforced by England, you had, it was like a caste system, but you had, people who were the upper crusties, and then you had, the man on the street.
You had zero social
there
mobility.
to serve the upper crusties, yes. Well, I don't even want to call it nobility, because as I understand what is noble, they don't qualify.
Now, Alton, what I said was zero social mobility.
Oh, mobility. I thought you said nobility. I'm sorry.
No. Britain has and was notorious for having very little class mobility over the generations compared to, let's say, the United States or, Italy or something like that. I mean, if you went to university, the odds were very high that your parents and grandparents had gone to university, that kind of thing. I mean, you just, there wasn't, there was a kind of soft caste system, I think you could argue. But anyway, so power is the issue, of course. Power.
Well, yeah, power
that
is the issue.
That motivates everybody, but I do think, though, that part of that comes with the paradigm, and so they want you thinking about certain things and not thinking about other things. And
well, that's how you maintain power. As long as you can keep people compartmentalized and ignorant of certain things, then it's more easy to maintain your power. This is how the CIA works. This is how the NSA works. This is how governments in general work, and it's part of that whole concept of what has been called the division of labor. They've actually made a doctrine out of this that people can look to, and rather than discover the truth, just say, well, it's my lot in life to be a janitor,
Yes. Well, anyway, let's get back to the bigger issue of the theory of electricity in the universe and what evidence there is for it. And we understand now the powers, the powers that be don't like it. But there are groups of physicists, and there have been for a long time, who've been promoting the electric universe theory. I think what was his name? Hannes Alphen.
Hannes Alphen. Others like, I keep pointing to, did that Torella experiment, Christian Birkeland.
Yes, Birkeland.
Of course, James Clerk Maxwell, he was on to electricity. Prior to the advent of Einstein's theory of relativity, the concept of an electric universe was the reigning paradigm amongst physicists and others. They could see it, it was observable, and they were slowly getting to the point where they could clarify and articulate various processes that they were observing in the skies above Earth and even on the Earth. And it's, I suppose, the best way to characterize it would be a return to what was a pre-Einstein theory of relativity type of science, where you even see the guys who are at the forefront of the electric universe, Walt Thornhill and all the other guys with the
Donald Scott. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. These guys are moving into what was once called natural philosophy. And natural philosophy basically ended this division, this compartmentalization of the sciences, like biology is different than geology, and geology is different than physics, and physics is even different than astrophysics. Well, no, it's all the same thing, and they're starting to see where electricity is the unifying factor in all these different sciences. often on the bot forum and elsewhere, I've recommended the book, The Body Electric.
Mm-hmm.
That book is just very clear, very concise. You can see how electricity works at the most minute level of a person's body. From the DNA level on up to the cell, on up to the various systems like the nervous system and your blood system and everything like that in your body. And electricity plays a role in each and every minute cell and function in your body.
It's funny that you bring this up, Alton. It's kind of funny you bring this up because a couple nights ago I was watching some videos by a doctor named Thomas Levy, who's perhaps the most famous doctor who recommends vitamin C injections, because vitamin C injections will cure just about any disease imaginable. And his speculation as to why this is because vitamin C is an electron donor. Almost all bad things take electrons, poisons of all kinds, for example. And so he also thinks that, for example, North Pole magnets would help, significantly, all kinds of things. If you can get the body in the mode of receiving electrons, all kinds of health problems will be ameliorated, is his thesis.
Well, it's that and used electrons, and this is just my thought on this, okay? Mm-hmm. We know that we have electrons, we know that we have protons, but then we have that oddball called a neutron. It's just a tron, and it's neither positive nor negative. I would contend that a neutron is a spent electron, an electron that has lost its charge and is no longer an electron, but is now a neutron. It remains a particle, but it carries with it essentially no discernible electric charge.
Well, you sound like a heretic.
I'm a heretic, but
Well, let's bring it in. Let's bring Neil in. Neil, you got any thoughts on that?
The vitamin C claim is very interesting, and I didn't know that it was considered an electron donor, and that certainly makes sense. From a practical point of view, because we are bioelectric. And I do wonder, just how much, the electric universe, affects us all and how it's affecting us now in terms of people's overall mental health, that we discussed a lot on the forum, for instance. And in general. And, my question, is how can we reclaim the electric universe potential, as individual human beings, really from the ground up. And the ground up would be, an individual human in all humans and then all life forms. When you look at the aerosol spraying that's going on in the sky, and some of the stuff that's going on there and the effects that it's having on, the bioelectricity of plants to humans and everything else. This is my biggest concern with, the electromagnetic energies coming from the universe. How can we reclaim them? And if it means taking more vitamin C, I'm in.
Well, that's a start. I mean, I think a minute ago, Alton's point about we need to return to natural philosophy is a bit of a high-level thing. We need doctors to study the idea of living things, living systems, not become a specialist in, the top half of a kidney or something like that.
Oh, yeah,
right?
But it's not only that. It's Neil brought up a very good point when he said from the ground up. People just somehow gravitate toward doing what they need to do for their health. And one of those things, especially when you're looking at vitamin C as an electron donor, is, well, what are you going to do with all the stuff that's in your body, the bad stuff, the other particles that really just don't need to be there because they're not doing anything beneficial for you, and in fact are acting as an added dead weight on your bodily system. And Neil said from the ground up, and that's exactly it. There's the practice called earthing, where you get in down to your bare feet, you get out, stand in the grass, or somehow connect with the earth. That connects you into that circuit directly and allows a lot of that drainage of that negative energy, that is not beneficial for you. The spent electrons, the things that are just a dead weight on you, that will allow for the exchange to happen and those to pass from your being. And that in conjunction with the vitamin C, which is adding in fresh new electrons, get you all charged up, and you're part of it. And we just need to be more sensitive to doing this on a more regular basis rather than as, beating this, what do I want to call it, emergency mentality. Oh, I'm sick now, I better go do this. Well, if you'd been doing some of these things all along, it could be that you would not be sick right now because you're maintaining that flow in your part of the universe.
Yes, well, I think we're kind of living lives out of balance, and that's why health is collapsing. In many countries, something called sand bathing is a traditional detox. And I've done this a number of times, but you need to find a place with clean sand, obviously. Preferably not white. It's stronger if it's a little darker. And you bury yourself in sand, and you stay there for a certain number of hours, let's say 8 hours. You bury yourself up to your neck, and drink water. And anyway, most people will have a very significant detox from this. You'll have things come out of your skin. Most people will have, and that's quite amazing when you think about it. But it's that strong. Being surrounded by the natural environment of Earth is that strong. For anybody, it's a traditional thing around the world. It's just we live in a period of time where all old stuff is scoffed at. And so people don't consider this. But, if you look at books from 100 years ago in different cultures, you'll find this. Anyway, why don't we move on a little bit back to the more traditional astrophysics kind of perspective here. So an important group is out there called thunderbolts, right? So Neil, are you familiar with thunderbolts?
I am somewhat, yes.
Have you seen any of their videos or perhaps read some of their books?
I have the Body Electric here. I've had it for years, and I have read some of their books, and I've looked at a few of their videos, and it's impressive. It doesn't do justice to their work.
Yeah, on the radio here, it's a little hard because some of it you need to see. For example, all of the petroglyphs around the world, so many of them are actually things that you would see in the sky at points when, let's say, a strong comet came by. Or perhaps, Velikovsky might be right. Perhaps it was very dramatic not that long ago, 5, 10, 15,000 years ago. Maybe Venus is a newcomer. There's that theory. I don't know. But those petroglyphs do look like electrical effects.
I've seen a number of petroglyphs, around the world. There's quite a few up in the area here where I live, and some of them were absolutely nondescriptive in terms of, was it a human being just standing there? And when you start to look at some of the electric universe symbols and whatnot, you suddenly start to see the magnetic torus, I think it is, you know, and I have seen one, speaking of comets, down in Arizona years ago. That was absolutely mind-blowing, and it had everything to do with the electromagnetic properties of a comet coming in to visit the Earth and the effects that it had. And
So are you telling me that comets are not ice balls?
I don't think they're ice balls in any way, shape, or form. I have no idea what they are, but I think there's a lot more power to them than, you know, I could even remotely understand, to tell you the truth.
Well, I'm laughing at this because we can see videos from governmental agencies around the world of comets going close to the sun and coming out, right? And it's like, well, if they were ice balls, they wouldn't be going close to the sun and coming out unscathed. And
No, that's never made any sense to me. I don't know about all, but that's never made any sense to me. I would have thought they would all be melting away, you know.
well, also we've had other things. Didn't was it Shoemaker Levy crashed into, was it Jupiter?
Yes.
Yeah, Jupiter.
And anyway, we've seen in modern times the behavior of comets that essentially proves that they're not ice balls, if you ask me. And that's very relevant because if they're not ice balls, and we're in a very, very charged environment, that means you could have the effect that Professor McCanney talks about, like a bug zapper. Are either of you familiar with his description of how a comet could play out like a bug zapper with the electricity in the solar system?
I've heard of it, but I couldn't begin to tell you the mechanics of it. Go ahead, Alton.
Alton, are you there?
Yeah.
Are you familiar with Professor McCanney's explanation of how a comet could be like a bug zapper?
Not his explanation in particular, but I could see how he would draw similarities between them. Essentially, a bug has a certain charge, and he's attracted by the light, and as soon as he hits that charged cage, there you go.
Well, the point is, of course, that if the Earth is part of the circuit, so to speak, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, right. Perhaps the comet will be zapped like a bug, but the effect on the Earth could be very dramatic. And so we can look at certain things around the planet and ask ourselves if those weren't from earlier electrical or I don't know if you're going to say accidents, but events. So, I mean, I know that I always looked at the Grand Canyon and wondered. They talked about, hundreds and hundreds of millions of years of water flowing, and you look at that whole general area and you say, maybe.
Paul and I had a discussion about that one time and comparing it to the big slice on Mars.
Yes, exactly.
I think we pretty much thought that, it was a rather large plasma event.
Yeah, that was always my gut feeling, is that the logical thing is that it's essentially a lightning strike. And, of course, that was not going to, when that lightning hit, it was not a good time to be within 1,000 miles or something. But that's, of course, we can't prove this, but I'm just saying when you look at something like that and you take the standard theory, you have to really ask if that's believable. I mean, hundreds of millions of years of water, then why don't we have cases elsewhere on the planet with hundreds of millions of years of water doing the same thing? Mm-hmm. Right? I mean, the rivers all over Earth, and that's just about the only one we've got that's so dramatic.
Yeah.
And so I'm suspicious of that one. So anyway,
well, if you're familiar with the process of electro-discharge machining, I'm familiar with it because I learned about it years ago when I was a youngster and, looking for employment at various places. And one of those places did just that, electro-discharge machining. And the process is, one, very interesting, very intriguing, because you're using essentially a plasma sheath that allows for an arc of electricity to fairly precisely, I'll say, cut sheets of metal, most any material. And, what you see with electrodischarge machining is the same kind of results you're going to see on planets like Mars, with the great scarring and the little blueberries that they find, which are just basically the remnants of what was blown out by electrodischarge machining. And if we look around the Earth, just using Google Maps or Flash Earth or something like that, where you can actually just look at the geography of what's been done, so much starts to become clear when you consider that it was done by electrodischarge machining, which would mean massive thunderbolts from the heavens carving out chunks of the Earth. And we see this like in the Sahara Desert, where you can actually go out there and find bits of glass that were formed in this process, just because it simply melted the sand. And when you stop and look at many of the things that have puzzled humanity for so long, like the Sphinx and the pyramids, and how they were built and everything like this, and we've tried every imaginable way to figure out how they move these big rocks, it could very well be that those things were made of concrete that was like cast in place, because with the burning of those big arcs from the cosmos, you would burn lime. And when you have burnt lime, well, you have the basis for cement. And it would have been so easy to move, a wheelbarrow load of cement rather than a huge, 400-ton block, and place it precisely there to form monuments like the Great Pyramids or the Sphinx or things like that.
Well, I guess I'd have a couple of thoughts on that. First of all, I think that I suspect they did build a lot of the pyramids essentially using concrete. However, I think there's a strong case to be made with a lot of the very heavy granite that we can even find out where they cut some of the pieces far, far away. And it looks to me like they just carried it, because we can also see that they used very advanced tools. Christopher Dunn is most famous for his books on this, advanced tooling or something, advanced machining in ancient Egypt. Some of the remaining, what they call things like a sarcophagus, they call things that misleading names, they're not what they are, have incredible measurements. I mean, 0.001 millimeters, inside lids and stuff like that in very hard granite, things that we can't easily do today. And so I think they had an advanced civilization, and I think they were a victim of the electric universe in the sense that I think there was some natural disaster, Noah's flood perhaps, or something earlier or worse or whatever. But something did them in is my general take. But it's totally legitimate to ask, what might have happened, because there are famous things like, I guess, the Libyan glass, the deserts between Libya and Egypt,
right,
where you've got these chunks of glass, and some people speculate this proves they had some advanced war in the past. Possibly, but maybe some kind of electrical event, plasma charge, something might have done that. I don't know. Have you looked into that?
Yeah, it's this stuff just fascinates me, and it because it goes to part of the mythology and more to the point, the reality of what actually happened. We have many unanswered questions like Egypt and what was done there, or the deserts outside of Libya and between Libya and Egypt. If you look at the Namib, Namib desert in Namibia,
Right.
it is eerily similar to what we observe on planets like Mars, Venus, and things like that. And it shows that there was great electrical energy expended there. And when you look at it in relation to South Africa and all the diamond mines and things like that, why would all those diamonds be down there? Because of huge electrical discharge. Okay,
Makes sense to me.
that's how they can make artificial diamonds now with great controlled electrical discharge in labs. And so
Yes.
you're actually, I don't want to say converting, but you're essentially purifying and compressing carbon to the point that you're producing diamonds with huge amounts of electrical energy. So think of what it would have taken to produce something like that at the tip of a continent. It's just, wow, mind-boggling.
Well, a bad day to be in Africa, I think, is the answer.
Probably a bad day to be on planet Earth.
Planet Earth was not big enough is probably the true story. But and by the way, diamonds are all over Earth. They're not really rare. They're massively all over, and they're just a controlled cartel by the usual suspects in the city of London. They're all over places like Venezuela. They're all over. And
they're in the American Southwest.
Yes, exactly. And that, again, gets back to that issue of the Grand Canyon and some of the other places there that look like they've been hit by something dramatic. By the way, moving on from this, I think there's another topic that's worth considering. I've listened to Professor McCanney for a number of years, and both of you probably know who he is. And
right.
He generally feels that the suppression of the electric universe idea is because we would get cheap energy. And he argues that the electrical currents in space could be used the way the ocean and wind currents were used to go around the world before modern engines.
Actually, they could be used much more specifically. There's still military records existing of where, they've always had, or not always, but at least since after World War II, they've had stations up near the North Pole, up in the Arctic region, and power would be shut off to conserve energy, and with the power off, they could actually, during periods of, bright auroras, they could actually use their tube radios to talk to each other without being powered by any generator or anything that humanity could produce. This was just energy right from the cosmos, and that was enough to power their radios to where they could communicate.
Are either of you familiar with Jerry Vassilatos? And his he was a guy at the Borderlands Science Research and Publishing, and he had a book on HARP, and I recommend it as being very much worth consideration. He was arguing, the book is probably 15 or 20 years old, but he was arguing that HARP was an attempt to harness the energy, the electrical energy coming into the poles from outer space.
Yeah. At first, I always suspected that much as he did. Not so much it would be harness it, but to capture it at a level that would make it useful. Because, HARP came about when the military was so concerned about the loss of petroleum which would power the Army, which would power the Navy, which would power the Air Force. Without energy, the Army isn't going to move except on foot, and you really aren't going to get too many people to do that nowadays. You know, we're not going to march across the ocean and go invade Europe or Russia or whatever. You have to have energy, and I'm really thinking they were looking for a way to capture that energy, and it's also been an exploration of how to control or redirect that energy to achieve, of course, statist or military ends. And I don't know. You know, HAARP's been accused of a lot of things, and a lot of people are, you know, making tornadoes and making earthquakes and huge storms and earthquakes. Well,
yeah, sure, but I mean, the book is 15 or 20 years old now, and I think that we know that many major projects have multiple purposes, like the spraying of things in the atmosphere. It can be for weather control. It can be to hide your aerospace activities from things. I think it's for LIDAR. If you know what LIDAR is, the laser version of radar, which is, 100 times better than radar, that kind of thing. So there are a lot of technical issues involved. But when you look at the HAARP facilities, they overwhelmingly tend to be near the poles, right, or particularly the North Pole. And that raises a lot of questions as to what they think they're doing. The issue of energy, I'm sure that
it's part of the name. It's
yeah, of course, of course.
High auroral something or other research project.
Atmospheric research project. Something. Yeah.
Anyway, they have to be near the poles.
Yes, of course. But I'm just saying it's worth considering that the electricity coming in may be a very, very important issue already. In other words, this may not be a topic for 100 years from now. And we might be able to harness the energy in cyclones, hurricanes and typhoons, because that's a massive electrical event. There are places like the coast of Florida that have lightning practically every day for, all summer long or something like that. There's a lot of energy out there already that we're not grabbing. But this Professor McCanney is arguing that there are these currents. We could already be sending spaceships, certainly throughout the solar system, based on these electrical currents. They might be slow. I'm not sure if they would have people in them or not. I don't know his thinking exactly. But the point is there are electrical currents in space that perhaps resemble the wind and ocean currents that the explorers used hundreds of years ago.
Right.
And
one such project, NASA developed an ion engine to propel craft, through the solar system.
Oh, by the way, one thing
I think they launched it. Yeah.
One thing that might be worth mentioning here, again, not saying it's true, but McCanney has a speculation that if you think about what might have been what the Earth might have looked like during, let's say, the Ice Age, the last Ice Age, or perhaps even before that. This is just a speculation now, but with the different ocean levels and so on and so forth, that there could have been massive electricity coming from storms reaching Southeast Asia across the Pacific, and that the amount of energy would have been mind-blowing by our terms today, because of course, how the storms ground out essentially, or how it gets discharged. And certainly, I don't know if that's true, but we have all these legends of Atlantis or past civilizations using crystals or other things that essentially got energy from the sky, right? And it's actually possible. I mean, this is total speculation here, but it is something that it is conceivable that these legends or myths or whatever you want to call them actually have some basis in fact.
Well, crystals are, I would tend to say they're more a product of that energy discharge. You know, like if you look around, have you seen pictures of like the crystal caves where they have these huge, I mean, multiple times the size of a man, crystal spars, you know, jutting out of the ground in every which direction.
In Mexico.
And it's all inside of a cave. Or if you look inside of a geode, you know, you have that same thing. You have that hollow space, and then you have all that crystal and rock in there. And so crystal is not so much a focus point or a generator for the energy, but rather a product of the energy passing through it. There's things based on the geode, and you can take that up to, well, magnitudes of larger sizes. Things like the Chinese dinosaur eggs, or they'll call them the phoenix eggs or thunder eggs. These are huge, massive boulders that are essentially monster geodes. You know, they might be like 2-3 meters in diameter.
Yeah, I've seen them.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah, and you have that as a result of the energy flowing by. So, yeah, it would be natural that people would associate crystals with the transfer of those cosmic energies. And when you take that a step further, you look into, and this has always puzzled me. I know it's captured the imagination of many people, but what were called the Vimana of India, you know, and they would have, well, they've got representations of people flying around in these craft, almost like a magic carpet with a bell tower over them, or however they're depicted. Some even look mighty close to a modern-day aircraft. And if you look at the petroglyphs, where you'll see these human-type figures that seem to be disconnected from the ground. They actually, like, float in the air. And you know, going back to our discussion on gravity and the electrical basis of gravity, when you have supercharging of the Earth, what we know as gravity, that dynamic changes and allows, well, things to float. Paul Muir has done a lot of work on things that he calls orbs, and that these energy orbs are seen, and they're being seen more frequently now by many people all around the Earth. And here again, you have that same type of manifestation going on as energies from the sun and elsewhere in the cosmos penetrate to the Earth and charge the Earth. We have more of this floating type stuff going on. And I really have to wonder, you know, if it really happened back then and produced what they called the Vimana in India, if we will see that once again.
You mean we don't have it now?
Energy continues to increase. Yeah, we have it now, but not at the level that they did then.
It's coming.
Well, I'm not sure that it might have been for the government officials only back then, and it might only be for them now. It might just be for.
Yeah, but it's a big leap between a horse-drawn cart and a Vimana, you know, as far as technology, and so it had to have been something else going on that would allow those things to occur. You know, not unless, of course, we want to accept the idea of space aliens from Cygnus 7 coming by for a visit and wanting to show how we can have a hierarchy here on Earth, you know, so people could power trip to their heart's desire, but, you know.
Well, I think now we're getting into ancient civilizations a bit, because the question is also that earlier in this show today, we went into the idea that knowledge control is important, but I think part of that control is that we have to constantly deny the technology and thought and so on and so forth, the literature and literacy, all those kinds of things that the ancient people had, right? And
Well, I
so,
think I'd like to jump in here for a second, if I may.
sure, please.
Um, I think to go back to that brief conversation that Alton was mentioning about people using their, old tube transmitters without the power up north, okay, around the poles.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just it was there. The energy flow was there that allowed it to happen. It ties into Tesla being able to harness that energy deliberately, whereas what Alton was referring to, around the poles, it happened rather spontaneously, and it wasn't something that went on all the time. Um, if you go back to Paul Muir's work, where he has
Right.
mentioned time and time again about uh, the magnetic fields and the electrical fields of the Earth being so much stronger, back in, I don't know, maybe the Druids' times, up to 6,000 years ago, where the electromagnetic energy of the whole thing that we're talking about here was much more prevalent and much stronger, and people were able to use it. And so, to me, my speculation right now is, the following. And if the Earth is changing frequency, which I believe it is,
Mm-hmm.
the Schumann-Gauss frequencies, I've seen it demonstrated, and it's a mind-blowing thing to watch from Professor Hans Jani. Turning up the frequency and the vibration and watching how things move and shift. Um, I think uh, uh, we're at that place, and this is what I want to know, is that if the frequency of the Earth is going up, and the electromagnetic energies coming from, be it coming as James McCanney postulates, whether it's a gravity wave coming from the center of the universe, whether it's the sun changing its, behavior, what's it going to do to us humans? And can we work with it or work around it? I don't know. And that's.
No, go ahead. Go ahead.
Well, let me
No,
add something to that. I'll just say that, I mean, first of all, I think uh, we need to look into some of these, we need to measure some of these things better because so much is going on with different militaries of the world testing things and so on that I'd like an idea of what's a permanent change as opposed to what's a localized event.
Well, I think that's one thing that we really can't call because as the solar system travels through the cosmos, we're right there along with it. So we could be entering, as has been speculated recently, a denser cloud where we're going to have energy increases. Or it might actually work in the opposite way and draw energy from our solar system. If that's the case, what's going to happen then? Nobody's really considered that. And as we travel through space over the ages, we're going to hit these hot patches and cool patches, foggy with dust or absolutely clear, and we're just sailing right on by. But then, nevertheless, we're always on the move, so our conditions change. So to call it permanent, it might be permanent for a generation. It might be permanent for 10 generations. We don't know. What we saw back in the period of what you call the ancient civilizations, with the Vimana, with the petroglyphs, and all this good kind of stuff, obviously that was not a permanent change. It might have been just an event, whatever caused that event, perhaps the passing of planets, adding new planets to our solar system. We don't know at this point. Nevertheless, it was a temporary thing, and humanity after that moved into a period of stability as far as our environment goes. And now we're going into new changes. And we're starting to see the effects of that, first in small ways, but we're also seeing it in bigger ways, like with the theory of expando Earth. And you can see it. You can see it daily. We're having more earthquakes, larger earthquakes. We have a lot of increased volcanic activity all around the Earth. We have sinkholes and great big cracks occurring here and there. And these, compared to what we consider historical, these are actually minor events. And we see things happening with animals, the dolphins dying, the birds falling from the sky, the beaching of many sea critters, like all the Humboldt squid coming up to California. And on it goes, and we cannot find a cause for these things.
Well, I'm going to have to interrupt on that and say,
nature.
I think that for some of them we can certainly speculate. I mean, there are different pollution events, the Fukushima or the Gulf oil volcano in the Gulf of Mexico.
Right, there are those. But before those happened, some of these things were already going on.
I agree with you, but I would point out that, I mean, if you're old enough to have gone to certain places like the Gulf of Mexico, for example, the entire coast of, let's say, Texas was fairly clean, except right near an oil refinery or something like that.
Right.
35 years ago or something, 30 years ago. And today, the whole thing feels filthy, if you ask me. And and so, there's the combination of modern civilization just dumping crud everywhere. And then I also think that they're drilling and doing stuff in ways that basically causes massive leakage. And now, the latest crazy idea, of course, is fracking. Right?
Right.
Just break the hell out of, break everything up and pour, poisonous chemicals all over, and it's okay if it comes in your water and so on and so forth, right? So, I mean, there is that.
Yeah, nothing like burning water.
There is that element of man's death wish, or at least the power elite trying to create an environmental crisis for further control and profits. But but certainly, I mean, we can see a lot of things going on that raise all these questions. Absolutely. By the way, I want to go back a second because we talked about Paul Muir's work there. Neil, so he gets into the issue of orbs, right, and energy stuff. Does he also talk about things like I don't know, EVP, or measuring other things that might be worth looking into? If you know what EVP is, that's the people who essentially try to broadcast at a certain amount of noise, and then they're hoping to let spirits, like ghosts, I guess you would say, talk back to them, or otherwise, control it and give a message.
I don't think Paul's into that at all.
Okay.
Not to my knowledge, anyways. He's, very much, into the electric universe, but it's his interpretations of what that energy does, and how it forms the orbs and the bars. And to an extent, I do believe it does dovetail, with what we're talking about here, because it's essentially talking about the same basic energy, the creative energy of the universe, really, whether it's plasma or beyond plasma. And he has measured the different times in history where it's been very strong, and Alton's absolutely correct. We get periods where it's very strong. People live longer, all kinds of things go on, and then we end up in a situation where it goes away, and now it's we're at that stage where, you know, I look at it myself as we're in that chaotic stage, where we're seeing huge changes, as Alton was referring to, the earthquakes, the volcanoes, the sinkholes, and I am a prescriber of the expanding Earth theory. We're in that moment, but we're also in the moment, according to Paul, and you know, where the orbs are being seen more and more frequently. So things are increasing. That's about as much as I can tell you. You know, Paul could explain it a heck of a lot better than me. It's his work.
Well, I know nothing about it. I mean, I've seen them at I was at invited to a Native American Indian burial facility, or
Yes.
area, and they definitely had lots of orbs of different colors there that one could see. And again, that was by invitation by the tribal leader, so it wasn't like breaking and entering spiritually speaking.
Were you referring to a Yuwipi ceremony, or was it a funeral?
It wasn't a ceremony. It was an invitation to a group of about 4 of us, because one member of the group had done a lot of thing for that local tribe.
Yeah.
And this was in the Southwest, but I don't know the terms of any of it. I just know what I saw, and they had different colors: red, yellow, blue.
Sure.
And it was very strong. We all saw it. I mean, there's no question that this was all over. But at the time, I interpreted it more as simply being their tradition, and they don't suppress the idea. They promote the idea, and so, it continues. Whereas to most of us Westerner types, this is something we want to deny or otherwise not promote. And so,
to bring it back a little bit back to the electric universe. You know, a lot of the First Nations people, indigenous people around the planet, still have the ability, albeit somewhat limited, to harness the electric universe. And this is the part that excites me, because I would like to see everyone be able to do it. And we wouldn't be buying gasoline and stuff.
Oh, well, then that changes the rules of the game.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, anyway, though, there's definitely this question of these energies that may be increasing or changing dramatically, and perhaps this leads to things like an expanding Earth. That's certainly one possibility that is worth a whole show, because that's, there's Neil Adams and his work, right? You've probably seen his videos.
Yeah.
And there's certainly it's worth looking into. But I'm also going to say, when you start looking into these things, you realize that you have to take some of your assumptions and put them aside and say, I'm not sure that I go along with them, right? I mean, the older I get, the more questions I have about the whole idea of ice ages as they've been presented to us. There are people who argue, I've seen it argued, that they've got lots of stuff from Antarctica that essentially makes the case that the ice there is fairly recent, and that there were trees, birch trees or whatever, not that long ago, and they may call them essentially, fossil material, but you can cut them, you can burn them. So to me, what they are is flash frozen trees. Like the flash frozen mastodons in Siberia or something like that. So anyway, the point is, when you start questioning things and saying like an expanding Earth and some of these things, you got to say that we can't assume things we've been told in the past is true, because those may be part of the paradigm control. And we get back to that. Well, I tell you what, I'd like to move on before we get too far and get into the idea that there may be things coming, like we know about this comet Ison, right?
Exactly.
And we may be entering, this comes with the energy issue, of course, the electric universe. We may be entering a part in the galaxy that has more junk or more energy or both, and we could start seeing a lot of events. Hopefully they won't be, fatal. We won't have, another Venus or whatever happened in the past. But it certainly is worth looking into. People are talking about Comet Ison. Do either of you have any knowledge about this comet?
Yeah, I've been following it since it was first announced, and I'm expecting some interesting events when it reappears from behind the sun.
I'm
what do you
somewhat
think,
familiar
Bill?
with it. I'm somewhat familiar with it, and I'm not so much looking at it from a science point of view as Alton is. It's more of an intuitive nature for me, and I too am expecting some rather interesting things to start transpiring. They already are, in my opinion.
Well, Neil, past civilizations essentially looked at comets and things in the sky as being omens, right?
I'm beginning to wonder. Yep.
And so it's possible that, basically God, whatever your vision of him, that God provides omens. And I don't know how it all, we don't know how it all materializes, but, to what extent we create the manifestation and to what extent it's just God wants something to be, I don't know. But it's a pretty widespread view that you get these signs in the sky. I think
the last bunch, have pretty much fizzled out, except for Shoemaker-Levy, which impacted Jupiter multiple times. Apparently, Ison could be a different creature altogether. I'm not prepared to say too much about it because I could only refer to my dreams and my visions of it. But I am expecting some physical events, and what it will do, I don't want to go there. Not right now. It's high, very much it's speculation.
Well, I also think things seem to be building. I see building tension all over. I think you see it economically, politically, socially. It's not all bad tension, but nonetheless, I see this building of tension. And
Yes.
so that I don't think that means that Comet Ison is the last. It might just be the next in the building stage. Alton, what do you know about this comet? What do you think?
Not much more than what you can already find released from the internet. And of course, greater minds than mine have been working on it. What I can gather so far, obviously some scientists at NASA are trying to downplay it, saying do not expect much. The typical is sun grazers, they'll disappear into the sun and that'll be the end of it. We won't see anything more. We might see a bit of a debris field or something like that, but it'll be nothing spectacular. I, on the other hand, tend to think it will be spectacular. It's going to come around the sun as has been plotted out on its orbit, and it will cross Earth's path. We will pass through its tail, and I'm thinking that we're going to be seeing up close and personal effects of that happening. We see it in the Whatnot reports. Well, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, a lot of people listening might not be aware of something important, but in the late 1800s, there was a comet Biela that went by, and there was something called the Great Chicago Fire. Yes. And if you were a school kid in the U.S., you learned about a cow kicking over a lamp or whatever, a lantern, and that's how we got it. But what they don't tell you in school, because it's not convenient, is at the same time, over a very wide area, you had like the 3 largest fires America's ever had. or something like that, 3 of the biggest 5 or something like that. And essentially, it's kind of like a triangular shaped area in the upper Midwest of the U.S. They had these huge fires, and they had very interesting physical effects. Something like I don't know if you want to say they're plasma, but things like the clothing on somebody not being burnt, but the body being burnt, or metal being fused, copper coins inside the body. Strange effects. People dying in one area, and then right next to them not dying. Things like that. And what was his name? Donnelly, the famous Ignatius Donnelly. He wrote about Atlantis. I guess he was in Congress, maybe, I don't know, was he a governor or something? Anyway, an interesting character in American history. And he wrote about this. And it happened right at the time Comet Biela came by. And isn't it entirely possible that something came off of the comet and caused this?
Entirely. It would be entirely possible.
I think it's quite likely, actually. And I think this is another thing. It's not just that we might get a new Grand Canyon. It's that some plasma gaseous fireball that you can hardly see could come down and do a tremendous amount of damage. Now, that's not the end of the Earth, of course. That's a localized thing. But nonetheless, it was quite dramatic. And if the population had been greater at that point, there would have been very serious, it wouldn't have been hundreds and, 1,000 people dead. It would have been, tens of thousands or something like that. So anybody listening out there should consider looking into that Comet Biela, Biela, I believe it was. You might be surprised that, you grew up hearing about this great Chicago fire, but you didn't hear about what may well have been the logical cause of it. And that could happen again. If Comet Ison gets close enough, that's certainly a possibility. Now, what about the general idea that we're entering an area of the galaxy with a lot more stuff going on? In other words, it's not just Comet Ison, it's that we may be seeing a lot of things. Is there much evidence of that?
Well, that's the thing. It's hard to say because it's at distances that, well, I'm not comfortable dealing with. It's hard for me to imagine 1 million miles, let alone 93 million out to the sun, and to go far, far, far beyond that, where our entire solar system is entering into, well, I'll just call it a space cloud. It's really hard for me to wrap my mind around. I can understand it to the point where I could say, yeah, there will be changes, but how far off into the future is that? I really have no grasp of how fast our solar system is traveling through the universe. What kind of distance are we covering in an hour? And
yeah, and in addition to that, I'm not totally sure that the model of the solar system is accurate. I mean, there is that speculation, the BOT theory, B-H-A-T,
yes,
that essentially the sun is a comet, and the planets are being dragged behind it, and that the heat in the coma of a comet blows our way and keeps us warm, and so on and so forth. Now, I'm not saying that this is true. I'm just saying that I have seen experimental evidence that things are not as clean as they taught us in school, which is a model that the sun doesn't move. Basically the stuff at least in my day, 40 years ago or whatever in school, they didn't have the idea that the sun was moving. The sun is the fixed point, and we're all moving around it. And
right.
I know that some have argued that you can see anomalies at the equator and at the poles that essentially show some problems with this model. Now, we can't get into that here. It'd be a long discussion. But Leeds Scalnan of the Coral Castle fame also argued that the model in the textbooks is easily provable false. And again, that's worth a show in and of itself with somebody who's more knowledgeable. But I think you can see how the idea that a comet may not be huge. I mean, people, when they watch TV and it says this thing is 100 meters across or something like that. And, in the scheme of things, the sizes in space and Earth, 100 meters doesn't seem like much. But,
No.
but if you get an electrical discharge and or you get, let's say you hit the oceans, you can see that a 100-meter asteroid hitting the oceans could be a very bad day indeed for a wide part of Earth. So I think we have to keep that in mind. Well, let's see. I had one other topic. It's a little bit more speculative. What do you think of some of the theories of the electric universe that are out there? Some of the modern theoreticians, the idea, like there's Eric Dollard, for example. Have you read his books? Do you have any thoughts on his stuff?
No, I haven't gotten around to reading Dollard's stuff yet. It's I'm still working on cementing the fundamentals, so I have a solid base to build on. And like Donald Scott's book has been tremendously helpful in that area. I work with electronics more often than not, the old tube-style circuits. And tubes, well, I'm just intrigued by them because they are a use of plasma to get certain things done. And the basics of the circuit, the capacitors, resistors, and tubes, and all this kind of stuff, has made understanding Donald Scott's book a lot easier, and understanding a lot of the fundamentals of the electric universe. And once you have that solid foundation, then you can reach out into greater theory, like, well, what will happen in a big electron cloud or something like that,
Well, I read Dollard's, he's got something called The Theory of Anti-Relativity, which is an interesting article, quite technical. I mean, if you don't have a background in physics or something like that, it's going to be a tough slog. But I do think that's worth reading for those who are technically inclined. He is a big fan of Steinmetz, and again, Steinmetz is one of those wonders. And earlier in this show, there was a bit of a talk about how do we go back to making a better world, right? And so I think,
Right.
If you look at Tesla, I think the important thing is not simply Tesla, it's the environment at the time that created Tesla. We had a much more open society in the West. And I think it's not just that we need to study natural philosophy, it's we need to look at how did we have all of these geniuses like Steinmetz or John Keeley, the list goes on. And we need to try to think about that too. We need this open society. And right now, let's face it, if you file a patent that's interesting, the national security state can take it and threaten you immediately, and they do. And interesting inventors end up missing or otherwise having suspicious heart attacks and stuff all the time. So we kind of have a civilizational problem. And I think many have talked about this, that to bring about a better future, we really kind of need to change our thinking. And that will quickly lead to, I mean, imagine with today's resources what a modern day Tesla could do. I mean, to say the sky's the limit is the sky isn't the limit. The galaxy's the limit if we had a new modern day Tesla. Well, let's see. Were there any other thoughts you wanted to bring to the show today, Neil?
As I said, I'm, very, very respectful of the electric universe, and I really appreciate being here just to listen to you folks talk. But I always have to come back, to the individual and how the body electric is affected by, the electromagnetism of the universe. And I think because we are going through such shifts, and because, as you've stated, we're in this paradigm where, the few want to control the many. We have to go up to a place somewhere within our beings to embrace the electric universe. I think it's vital. I really do. That's about all I want to say. And apart from saying thanks, everybody.
Well, we're not done yet. We got a couple
Okay.
topics left, but I do think that the point is if it's an electrical universe and the Earth is electrical and our bodies are electrical, I mean, think about that. And then if it's 27 orders of magnitude more important than or stronger than gravity, I mean, think about that for a second, what that means. We are electrical beings. The universe is electrical.
Yes.
And I mean, that just, and I think when you look at interesting phenomenon out there, like that you can sometimes see with meditators or Qigong or different types of martial arts, that kind of thing, there's a definite electrical feeling to it that you can really see if you start looking into it a bit. I don't know. Have you ever seen the videos of John Chang, the guy from Indonesia,
Yes, I have.
creating a fire with his hands and stuff like that?
Yes,
Um,
I have.
uh, I'm certainly not arguing that it's 100% electrical, but I'm just pointing out that the manifestation in reality as we know it seems to be an electrical phenomenon. And, uh, you know, some of the research that's done on psychic stuff has a very electrical element to it. They've done studies with that at Stanford and at other places. So I think we really need to think about it. And then on the bad side, of course,
Well,
some of that nasty stuff like mind control. Yeah, go ahead, Neil.
yeah. If I can just add one thing, I do believe that as much understanding as we can gain individually and collectively of the electric universe, it's a key to freedom. It's a key to many kinds of freedom. And it's something we should all be embracing. That's it.
Yeah, that's well said. I agree. It's one of the keys to freedom is to think that the whole nature of the universe and our bodies is not what we've really been told. I agree with that. Alton, anything you want to kind of add to the discussion today?
On that particular note,
It can be on any note.
Simple, just stay plugged into the universe, plugged into the energy of life. We've got a lot that can distract us and concern us right now at this particular point in time. And as some say, bring on the doom. Well, I'm not looking forward to the doom. The doom is going to come. The doom might possibly have to come. But it doesn't mean that we have to be taken down by it, either physically or mentally. We still have life. We still have life to live, and much life to live, no matter how oppressive governments may be or how ignorant some choose to be in sciences and things like that. That doesn't matter. We're still free to explore, and we're still free to benefit from what we discover in our journey through this life. So make the most of it while we can.
Yes, I agree. And then I guess I'll sound a little Asian here, but I'm going to say that the answer is within to some extent. A lot of Eastern philosophy is like go within and, meditate and so on and so forth. And that can be exaggerated perhaps, but I do think you kind of have to have a balance that some people get all focused in the latest, political thing, this, that, and the other, but a lot of that is just really noise. And we should try to think more about our higher level selves. And if we can get our health in better shape, if we can get our thinking in better shape, then we will perhaps move towards that natural philosophy kind of environment that existed 100 years ago or so. And it's within our power. So that's what I'm looking forward to, is a general movement in that direction. And I actually think there's a lot of reason to be upbeat. I think you can see it in the horizon, actually all around the world. You know, there are probably
many
more people
positives
studying
going
Tesla
on,
in
yeah.
Asia than in the U.S.
Yeah,
What was that?
discovering the truth. For some, it's waking up, but we're still discovering the truth about this life. And yeah, there might be some things that anger us or upset us in some way, but the thing is we're still moving forward. We always have that possibility for change, and there's so many good things going on as far as trends, where we start seeing the hierarchies of this world. They're becoming weak. They're becoming, well, they're moving towards collapse at some level, where they'll have a minimal impact on our lives. The hierarchy won't be so much the big thing to deal with as it is the individual discovery, the individual finding what's working for them in their lives. And since many of those things are common to all in humanity, it's, well, it can do nothing but get better, because it's gotten pretty bad so far. You know?
Well, I think the answer is we have to build our own communities. I mean, that's the in the broader sense. I don't mean like,
Sure.
you know, join a local, you know, kibbutz or something like that. I'm just saying that the answer is on us. It's not that there's going to be some guy in Washington, D.C. or wherever you are, London or Ottawa, who's going to do it. It's on us to create the alternatives. And the first thing is changing your thinking so that you realize the body is electric and that the universe is electric and the earth is electric. And once you go from that, then things start to fall in place. And so that was my thinking in having this show today. So I'd like to thank both of you for coming, and I'd like to thank everyone for listening. And until next week, that's it for this edition of The Plain Truth. Take care. Bye.